Okay, we're live.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Mahone Bay Town Council. Our first meeting back since the summer break. So nice to see that we all survived the sun and the surf and barbecues and everything else. We will begin by acknowledging tonight that we are gathered tonight in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral, present, and future territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Tonight, we gather with the intent followed by the peace and friendship treaties. We do so with respect, cooperation, and coexistence. Also, we'll say welcome to the folks at home who are joining us via YouTube. And we have a citizen here with us in council chamber. And I would remind you that at item number 4 on the agenda is an opportunity for a citizen to speak to council if they wish. And when the session is ended, that'll be after item 9, before we begin the closed session. There will be an opportunity for citizens to ask questions of council on any topic that was discussed through tonight's agenda. Okay? What is your wish with the agenda? Move to be approved. Councillor Carver?
Well, I'll second the motion, but I do have a request to move two items.
Okay, which 2 items?
Well, and with apologies to Councillor Wilson, I sent an email a little while ago, which I don't think you received. I wonder if the 2 items 7.4 and 7.5 are time sensitive, but because they have no background documentation available for council, and we don't know what the items are, whether they could be put forward to a subsequent meeting.
Defer to the next meeting in September. That's item 5 on crosswalk lighting, and item 7.7 on public information discussion. No, I'm sorry,
No,
7.4.
7.4.
Conversion of wastewater treatment plant laneway to a public road. Councillor Carver, or I'm sorry, Councillor Wilson, are you?
I'm not. Those 2 items were put on the agenda as notices of motion originally, or asked to put on as notices of motion.
Okay.
They were changed into actual items because some things had changed with regard to this whole notion of laneway. And this seemed a way to get at that topic. And I think the flashing lights at crosswalks is self-explanatory. I don't know what information you could add to it to make it any clearer. So I would rather keep it on, at least in some form, so we can get things moving.
Okay.
I would like to have more information about both the items before the meeting.
Okay. Well, council, having information on the item before the meeting is the norm. But what is we can either defer the item or not.
Has the motion been seconded? Has the motion as originally made been seconded?
Councillor Carter, I thought, was seconding it
With an amendment.
with the proviso for the amendment.
Yes.
And then the person who made the motion would have to
Have to agree.
Can I suggest something? That we revert these both back to the original, which was the intent, notice of motion.
I mean, I would certainly satisfy that concern, because then they go down to that section tonight, they'd only come forward the next week. And my apologies if maybe the system for notices of motion has come up as a slightly challenging part of the process, because a notice of motion is typically given at a meeting to indicate that something will be put on the next meeting agenda. But we had plenty of notice that these were gonna be on this agenda, so then they didn't need to be notice of motion from that perspective, but they still can be, so if that's acceptable to the person to put them on there.
Mayor, with regard to 7.4, my understanding was that that item dovetailed with timing that has been included in the staff report for at least 6 months. And in the staff report that's been provided to council over the last 6 months, it's this meeting is when that item was going to be discussed. So I'm all for deferral if it adds value, but my understanding is that we wanted to have that conversation at this meeting, so we don't have it through Councillor Wilson's vehicle. Let's just make sure we can have the conversation in a public forum through some mechanism. Specifically, this is, anyway, I'm sure the CAO can talk to that.
Well, I'm struggling to get a voice in, raising my hand for a while. I think we shouldn't delay this issue. We've been banding about it for quite a long time. We have all the information we need. I strongly urge us not to delay it further.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Mr. Hyde?
And in no way is this intended to be like a rebuttal on Francis's point. I did have my hand up earlier. I only wanted to know, Joe, to your question, like regardless of whether Councillor Wilson's motion specific to that laneway appears as a notice motion type or as a council item tonight, which is council's decision. The piece about the creation of additional standards that would apply to public roadways is otherwise on the agenda. I just wanted to make sure that, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was happy to see that. Yeah.
But if this item had stood as a notice of motion when it was submitted, would you not then make your motion tonight?
I guess.
Yeah.
So has the original mover agreed to the amendment?
No, we
No.
still don't know if
So,
if we even need.
so let's do that.
Okay,
Let's
do you agree?
No,
No,
I think
okay,
we should try to.
so the original motion is
So
stand,
I'm happy to second the motion as
Unseconded.
Yes.
okay. So we have a motion,
The motion was already seconded by.
No, it wasn't.
The issue was maybe second it with some conditions. So the proper procedure now that it has received a second, Penny, if you wanted to move to amend the motion to approve, you could make that motion now. It's a separate motion on the motion. So if you want to say, I move that we amend the motion on the floor to reflect what you said, and then have that voted on, that is your prerogative if someone seconds your motion to amend.
Thank you.
It's an unfriendly amendment. This is the rules for an unfriendly amendment.
I plan to make an unfriendly amendment to delete those two items, 7.4 and 7.5 from the agenda tonight, forward them to the next meeting. That's my motion.
now we need a seconder for that motion, do we not?
Or it just dies on the floor.
Well, yeah, we don't get it. No seconder? No seconder.
If there's no seconder, can I speak to it briefly or not?
You can speak to the original motion, which
Yes, I
is.
guess that was what
seconded.
technically would be.
Okay, the original motion, thank you. I am concerned about the items on the agenda that do not have any background information available for the meeting tonight. Although the deputy mayor has said that there has been plenty of discussion about this. There is no material tonight available for this agenda package, and I would prefer to have that material available. It's required by policy, and I think it is, I don't like to have to dig through past agendas to find all the previous discussions and previous documentation. So I think this would be considerate to follow the policy and provide the agenda at the time of the motion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Carver. Any other comment on the question? Councillor Now, would you like to repeat your motion?
That we accept the agenda as presented.
Okay, and it's been seconded by Councillor Feeney. All in favor? Motion is carried. And we have one opposed and 6 in favor. Deputy Mayor, I didn't see your vote. I'm sorry. I apologize for that. Thank you, sir. Okay, then let us go with this agenda. Minutes of the regular council meeting of July 27th.
Mayor, they looked in good order. I'd move that we approve the meeting, the minutes of the regular meeting of the 27th of July as submitted.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Carver. On the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Let's go to the special council meeting of August 11th.
Move they be approved as submitted.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Now. Councillor or CAO. Councillor CAO.
Yeah, that's okay. I'll stick with the CAO. I just wanted to note, we made a mistake with respect to Councillor Feedy. It doesn't note that he did provide regrets for his absence from that meeting. So if I could request that small amendment to the meeting, that would be great.
Okay. Mover and seconders, okay with that fix? Okay, on the motion. With Councillor Feeny back in place, all in favor? The motion is carried. Thank you. And we have a presentation. Mr. Delorme is in the shadows. And Matt, as you probably all know, is the executive director of the AIM network. And he has been somewhat preoccupied of late with a group of very enthusiastic volunteers. Some from the town of Mahone Bay, who are developing a sustainability summit, which takes place on Friday and Saturday. The first day, the Friday, is intended primarily for elected officials, and the Saturday is open to the general public. Takes place at the Nova Scotia Community College campus in Bridgewater. 23rd and 24th.
22nd and 23rd.
22nd and 23rd. That's a week from this week, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So if councilors, if you have an opportunity, you might want to go over, especially on a Saturday. I think we'll hear what some of the public interest is in particular on the notion of sustainability. Anyway, Matt, welcome.
Thank you.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Okay. So should I be sharing a presentation or just talking to you?
As you wish.
Well, we have your presentation, but also if you want it to be available for anyone from the public who's watching the YouTube, then you'll need to share it. Or Kelly, can you share it? No. Okay.
Oh, I can now.
Oh, because the person talking will have to be the one sharing. Yeah. Okay.
There we go.
Okay. So this presentation is coming with great thanks to two people in the room there, Councillor Carver and Dylan Hyde, who are part of our organizing committee, and this has been a real group effort. So there was definitely an army behind this, and really appreciate you guys participating in this. The whole project here is funded under the FCM Municipal Asset Management Program, funded by the Government of Canada and delivered by FCM. So we're very grateful to them. Mayor Devaney just introduced me, so I'll just very quickly say as a reminder to anyone who is not familiar with it, that AIM Network, we're a nonprofit organization, and we help do training, education, and technical assistance with municipalities for infrastructure management. My goal in being here is really just to present, the benefits for you attending this, what you could get out of it, and try to really encourage you to attend on the Saturday and Friday sessions. So the project in general, which as you know, we've been working on for the last quite a number of months, is really looking at the fact that infrastructure management is going to change. There's a new national adaptation strategy. We're already seeing the impacts of climate change, and at the same time, we're having to deal with aging infrastructure in a way that we've really never had to since we started putting our built infrastructure in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. There's also a real interest. This is not news to any of you in natural assets and how the non-built environment can contribute to those services. Plus, we're in this really unique situation in Atlantic Canada where we're seeing unprecedented population growth and demographic changes. So there's a lot of challenges and opportunities ahead of us in terms of managing municipal infrastructure. And the solution is really looking at long-term planning strategies. What is it we're trying to accomplish with infrastructure? Because we're going to have some tough decisions to make on where to invest and where not to invest in order to balance the costs with risks and service delivery. Because to put it bluntly, there isn't enough money available in Canada right now to do all of the infrastructure work we need to. So we need to get really creative. And part of what we do at AIM Network is we're really trying to get this idea of community involvement and getting people really invested in the infrastructure decisions that are made in their communities. And that leads us to the two components of this summit. So the Staff and Council Day, which of course, you're all invited to. It's split into two parts. In the morning, we're going to be looking at a natural asset project that we're working on. We understand that natural solutions are required as part of our infrastructure strategy, and communities of the future are going to look very different. You can see there it affects all aspects of municipal management. What we've been working on is really looking at defining levels of service for natural assets. What exactly is it we want them to do in terms of not just how they support services like potable water and transportation, but also things like community well-being and health and the sort of non-tangibles. Right now in Canada, there is a guideline on how to build these levels of service, but there's no standard for it. So we have, with the group here and a lot on the sidelines, we've been planning the summit, have been putting together a level of service template that we'll be introducing to you and looking for your feedback on how we're really defining what services those provide. And in really kind of interesting news, we've been talking to the Canada Standards Agency about partnering with them next year, taking what we've done here to start piloting out and feeding into being a basis for a potential Canadian standard. We're also going to be talking to you about how we look at risk assessment with natural assets. That means things like you built that really great living shoreline there. As you go into the future, you're going to have to make decisions like, do we do natural asset work, or do we replace pumps at our water treatment plant, or do we fix the leaking public works roof? We need a way to be able to look at all of those on an even playing field, and we've come up with a strategy for that again, we want to run by you. The last half of it is building on the existing work that you've done with regional cooperation, because you're already really ahead of the game with that. So we've got your existing Joint Services Board, emergency management, building inspection and accessibility coming in to talk about what some of the successes and challenges were so far. And then building on that, we're going to look at what some potential new areas are. This is a closed session. It's just for council and staff. There won't be any decisions made, but we're hoping to come up with a bit of a roadmap to look at some of those potential service areas on where it makes sense for you to keep that momentum moving forward. This is the agenda for the day. In the interest of time, I won't go through it in detail, but it's giving you an idea of what's happening throughout the day, starting at 10 o'clock. And then on the Saturday, the public engagement, this is also really important because we want that community involvement. So when we do have these tough decisions to make, we understand what the residents need. So we'll be looking for community feedback on some of those difficult questions, really looking to show people that there's a commitment to addressing these risks that are coming up. We've got 35 presenters of different NGOs, nonprofit groups, industry. It's a great place to get all of them together to talk to each other and for you to be able to engage with them and see all the work that's going on in the community. We'll be doing an exit survey at the summit so that we can provide you with a summary of what the residents have to say about that and what their concerns are. And ultimately, we're just hoping to generally increase education and engagement around climate issues. So I did want to say here, now that we're getting towards the sort of latter quarter of this project, this is an amazing thing about the MANT program. So the contributions to this, I can't remember, was about $1,800 or $1,900. And what's ending up coming out of this is not just this really massive summit that's happening, but we'll have these defined level of services and projected costs related to at least one critical natural asset. Probably in Mahone Bay's case, it'll be one natural asset class. Risk assessment for the same, so you can really see how it's being prioritized in relation to the rest of your infrastructure. Plus, we'll provide you with all the tools, templates, and the roadmap to complete those remaining assessments with your in-house staff that have gone through this process. If all goes well on the Friday session, we'll have a roadmap of actions to expand that regional cooperation and shared services. And you'll have the resident surveys, so a good data set to tell you what's of concern to your residents around climate and natural asset infrastructure management. So again, thank you. I really appreciate your time. I know you have full agendas, and always am grateful when I can come in and speak to you. And I'll just open it up if you have any questions.
Councilor Owens Craw.
I'm registered, but I was trying to find out more information about the Friday program where it was focused around staff, and I couldn't really find a schedule.
Yes, so you have the schedule is in your agenda package, and I have to confess I am really embarrassed saying this in front of Councillor Carver, because I have been promising her and other people that I was going to send some individual letters with actually an agenda with some descriptions, which I have letters written up. I need to compile it with that final program and send it to you. Again, hopefully tomorrow I'll get those out so that you can actually see not just the agenda you have, but a bit more of a description from me on what we're trying to do in each part of the session.
Councilor Carver.
Thanks, Matt. Do you want councillors and staff to register through you or through our CAO?
Oh, thank you for bringing that up. So for the Friday session, if you could please let Dylan know, and he'll give us the people that are coming. And the main thing for that is so we can just make sure there's enough chairs and food for all of you when you come. Something I forgot to mention with that, we have actually invited your neighboring municipalities that aren't in the program to come as observers, because we think that they'll probably be involved in future conversations. But we have been clear that it's just in an observer. So Queens, Chester, and the town of Lunenburg. So let Dylan know if you're intending on coming on the Friday for any part of it. And if you're coming on the Saturday, again, just so we know to get food for you, you can register on the AIM Network site, and you can look at the South Shore Sustainability Summit Facebook page. There's all of the links there. And if you register online, we'll make sure we order enough food, because attendance is free.
And people better register soon, because there's well over 100 already registered, and space will be running up.
We do. We're pushing close to 130 right now, and as an indication, we had about half that many in the one we did up in the North Shore in Pictou County at this point, and ended up with 150. So we're expecting north of 200 people at this right now.
Deputy Mayor, is your hand up? Must be my cursor. Look at that, it is.
Well, thank you very much, Matt. I also wanted to acknowledge that as part of the program, Mayor Davini has agreed to be a part of a panel of mayors that I guess I've also agreed to facilitate. So anybody who wants to come out, we'll get to see that and hear some comments from the mayors.
Anything else? Okay, thank you, Matt.
Thank you so much, everyone.
We'll see you at the event.
we'll see you there, and Dylan and Councillor Carver, we'll see you on Thursday. Okay, bye.
Thursday, yes.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah.
Thursday at 3. I think it's the me, okay. Thank you. Let's go to item number 4, the public input session. Sir,
Thank you.
if you'd identify yourself and give us your address and
Will do. Okay, good evening, council. My name is Dave Byfield. I live on Hawthorne Road, 232 Hawthorne Road. And I'm here tonight to speak to council about the land use, the existing land use bylaw. And specifically the interpretation around section 4519. So just to back up a bit, so I sent out you all a letter, I'm sure you received, detailing an issue I'm facing with my property. And the fact that I'm getting tremendous water runoff from an adjacent property that's damaging my property and putting my property in peril, given the rains of the last 2 or 3 months. So maybe I could start by saying I'd like to thank those of you who reached out to me to discuss the situation and learn more about the problem. But I can't because none of you got a hold of me and bothered. So that's why I'm here tonight. I've had past conversations with the mayor and CAO about this particular section of the existing land use bylaw. And it was explained to me that that section of the land use bylaw, as it's written, pertains only to developments as a whole, not individual lots or individual homeowners. So if you read that, and it says developments, then you go to the land use bylaw definition. And the definitions as listed in the land use bylaw. The development is as to include any erection, construction, alteration, replacement, or relocation of or addition to any structure. That tells me it might apply to an individual lot in a home. The specific wording of that section of the land use bylaw says measures including lot grading shall be shown to adequately dispose of storm and surface water. Adequately dispose of storm and surface water. So I got a couple of questions for council. Number one, what is the rationale behind that interpretation of the existing bylaw to not include individual properties and homes? Question one. Question two, why does council not see that protection of properties from water runoff damage, given climate change and everything else that's going on, is not required? Is council willing to take another look at how this bylaw is interpreted versus how it was perhaps intended? Finally, does council agree that protections for homeowners from such circumstances are needed, and it is indeed incumbent upon council to ensure such protections are in place and enforced? That's all I have.
thank you, sir. CAO?
Well, I think the third question is really directed at council, but I could speak to the first two where their interpretation of the bylaw, if you want me to. I know I have before, so
Yes, please.
it may seem like a broken record to some. So I'm just gonna go back to the, just for anybody listening as well, just to make it as deliberate as possible. I'm gonna go back to the actual section in question 4.5.19, and Dave, I hope this helps. I don't know that it will, but that section it begins, the first sentence, where listed as a permitted use within a zone, the specified developments may be allowed through the site planning process in accordance with the municipal planning strategy policy 6.2.6. And that's really the key to this whole section 4.5.19, which has come up in a number of cases as causing confusion for residents. So it has been flagged, obviously, as something not to repeat in the new bylaw, because there's a lot of circular language. But what it's actually saying there is, and this has been our interpretation in many cases, and there's a strong reason for that, which I'll explain, is it where a site plan is required. So where a development is otherwise required to have a site plan, which is a type of process more complex than that applied to most development permit applications. So that bylaw lays out the situations in which a site plan as an additional approval process will be a requirement of a development. In those situations, subject to conditions in addition to other applicable requirements of the bylaw, these provisions apply. So then when you look at anything under 4.5.19, it is only being called into the process in the event that a site plan is otherwise a requirement of the bylaw. So that's why it didn't apply in this case. It's why it didn't apply in the case where the town had a previous, legal challenge essentially on this basis. And what it's saying is every development permit application by the reading that's been kind of raised is why don't you interpret it to apply to every development permit application rather than the ones prescribed only by site plan approval. And the reasoning is very clear. Heather, our development officer, has referred to this many, many times, is if every development permit were assumed to have all of these requirements, the level of effort required to obtain a development permit and the level of effort required to review an application and time entailed in processing would all be astronomically higher than they are today. And it would be very cumbersome for most residents to meet. So when we're looking at, and this is the subject of the third question that they've mentioned, when we're looking at the new bylaw, which we are, and we know that there's a need to do better than the wording in this section, and council has strongly had significant discussions with the steering team about stormwater management, what we are conscious of is not accidentally creating an extremely cumbersome process that would apply to all development permit applications. So that's the sort of traditional response that we've given, and hopefully provides a little bit of clarity around why this section is not interpreted to apply to all development permit applications. First off, it does specify at the beginning that it wouldn't, but also the reason that it wouldn't is because it would make those applications extremely cumbersome to respond to. So I guess the third question really comes down to, the steering team is currently working on drafts. And if councillors want to comment about how those drafts might approach the general question of stormwater, and if it is a priority to council to do anything differently than what is being done now, I think that question was directed to everybody. You don't have to respond to it, but I probably shouldn't respond to it.
Councillor Garber,
May I
hesitation?
ask a question of the CAO?
Yes, please.
So if the current plan review changes that section of the land use bylaw, would it affect a current situation?
No, the way the new land use bylaw will be written, and this is always the case with land use planning documents, and it's a good question, is that when an application is received for a development, the bylaw that prevailed at the time will be the bylaw that applies. So a new development permit application will be handled under the new bylaw. And the only distinction around that is within the couple of months before and the couple of months after adoption, then there are often some, if a permit application's been received but not processed, and we've had conversations about that, but thereafter, any applications would be treated in accordance with the new bylaw, and there's no looking backwards to apply the new bylaw to previous applications.
So once the new bylaw is proclaimed, then permits that are requested following that date would follow the new bylaw.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, go ahead.
Do we have any indication that Mr. Highfield's situation would be affected in a positive way if that new bylaw had been in place?
So as far as those type of land use provisions, the only way that it would be is if the neighboring property applied for another permit to make similar modifications that would result in any stormwater that would then trigger a new requirement similar to the one that's being cited that didn't apply in this case, that could bring the new bylaw into,
Yeah.
but it would only do so if that party triggered it.
Mhm.
Now, there is a caveat to saying that that's the only way in which this would relate to stormwater, because the planning strategy also says, at least the current draft that was provided to the public to review in the spring, that the town will contemplate the bringing into force of a separate stormwater management bylaw.
Right.
And that bylaw, at such a time as it might be adopted, could impact existing properties,
Hmm.
because it's not a land use planning bylaw. Now, how it would do is, we haven't even started talking about a draft, so I can't comment on that, but there is a possibility there, that it could come to bear on this situation, but that probably should be saved for if the planning strategy is adopted with the provision, and then we go into a drafting process on a stormwater management bylaw.
Councillor Lonsdale.
Apologies for, I just got your letter in our package, so that's the first I did see of it. And I'm assuming most of council the same way, so we just got this before our meeting, so it's new to me, but I'd like to ask the CAO also a question is, so what can we do to prevent neighbors from redirecting water and doing things that affect other people's properties? Like, is now the time for us to make some kind of bylaw? Since we're doing the strategic plan, because with increased water issues that we've seen this summer, we're going to see more and more of that. My experience in the past, in my previous life, there are a lot of people who have these small tractors, and they do a lot of things in their yards. They change waterways. They do a lot of damage that doesn't look like it's damage, but they change a lot of waterways that end up affecting the property next door or a couple properties down from them. So I'm just a little, concerned about maybe it's something that we need to talk about more when we work on the strategic plan.
So, I mean, it's a great effect, if I may.
Okay.
It's a
Deputy
great
Mayor
question. It
is
does come
waiting,
back over the same territory I just covered. So just want to make it clear
That's okay.
for Suzanne and also anyone listening. So there are two ways. One is through amendment to land use bylaw, and that would only pertain to new developments. And that's currently underway. A new draft is anticipated to come forward to council this fall after the steering team's finished reviewing. And then the other one is because pursuant to that, we would be just instructed by ourselves, by adopting planning strategy as it stands, to develop a separate stormwater management bylaw. That would also pertain, so that actually would pertain more to what you're talking about in terms of potentially like a small modification, not technically triggering the requirements of the land use bylaw. So if somebody just went out and put a ditch in a culvert, something like that, that type of thing wouldn't necessarily require a development permit.
Mhm.
But it would still be governed by whatever stormwater management bylaw was in place. So if pursuant to the planning strategy, we do develop one next year, that is the mechanism. So just in terms of what can we do, that is what we can do. It will take now a number of months to get there.
Right.
No, you'll have to wait, sir. Deputy Mayor is waiting patiently. You're on mute, I think, Deputy Mayor, can't hear you. No? Do we have a?
No, I don't know why.
We were able to hear him at the hearing.
Yeah?
It's not muted on this end.
There you go.
Okay.
Got you now.
Yeah, so I just wanted to thank, I think it was Mr. Heikel, for bringing the issue to the table. I think it's very helpful for us, the steering committee. But I'd love to remind council of our challenge around how we, I guess, accept, respond, and have dialogue during this input session, because you set up expectations. If you respond to one this way, you have to respond to everything else that comes down the pipe the same way. So I'd say I think this is an issue that we will be addressing going forward, and we've talked about addressing it in the revised documents, and leave it at that for tonight.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Wilson.
I agree with the deputy mayor. I'm prepared to leave it for tonight.
In anticipation of,
Tomorrow's another day.
and the review, the changes that will come about with.
Well, I would say one thing to Mr. Highfield, if I may, and that is, and I'm speaking from some personal experience now, is that I, not in Mahone Bay, but elsewhere, had this problem, this exact problem. And my recourse, and the only recourse that I know of, is through the courts.
Yeah, that was explained to me. And I looked into that, spent a few $1,000s on that. The end of it is beyond my means.
Yeah, it's a coin flip too.
Okay.
But other question for the CIO, if I may. This procedure that you mentioned there in detail, Dylan. Is that followed to the letter on every development permit that comes up? Like everything in that, is that followed right to the letter? Or is it pieces of it are picked pertaining to the scope or the complexity of the project?
Yeah, you mean, just to make sure I understand the question, if a development is prescribed to go through the site plan process, does all of 4.5.19 apply?
And everything else in that section.
Yeah, I think that's a question the development officer would have to respond to, because that is really her jurisdiction. So I think each of the clauses has its own language, but it's
Has its
certainly
own place.
her responsibility to ensure it's applied consistently.
Yeah.
I'll say that, yeah.
I would suggest it probably isn't, because it wouldn't be relevant in each situation. But my question would be, why can that one simple clause there where it says adequate disposal of stormwater and runoff? I mean, that says it all.
Councillor No?
Yeah, just a point of order. I thought during the public input session, we're not supposed to have the back and forth.
That was the change.
Yeah, that was actually changed. I think there may be some differences of.
Yeah.
So what happened when we moved it onto the council agenda was we did change it so that it did allow.
It did allow
for-
So I think, I think it was really helpful, that Mr. Highfield came to council today. As well, we have the letter, which we'll be responding to within correspondence. I think cutting to the chase, and I taking cue from Deputy Mayor's advice. I think it is clear that the land use bylaws currently being proposed is not going to resolve this issue for Mr. Highfield or someone else in his circumstance, because we're not going to require a new build to absolutely have to have a site plan. So that's my understanding, for all the reasons we talked about with Heather and the cost and so on and so forth. So doesn't at this moment doesn't appear to be a silver bullet. I think that's a fair comment that the community should be aware of. Like, the land use bylaw is not going to have a requirement for a site plan. I think that's a fact, right? So the way to address these types of issues to Mr. Highfield's satisfaction and other people down the road in areas where we have these types of challenges, geographic challenges, topographical challenges, I'm assuming is going to come through a stormwater bylaw with engineering and a requirement for a site plan or mitigation to solve these problems. So it's my understanding, and if I'm mistaken, this would be a good time to correct me, but I don't think the entire resolution of this challenge is going to happen through the land use bylaw, but I do believe that the combination of the land use bylaw improvements with the stormwater bylaw, which I think the commitment that this council can make tonight is that we will prioritize that bylaw and make sure by the end of the term, knowing that the wheels are slow, that we will get that done. I mean, I think committing to prioritizing the stormwater bylaw and all of its requirements, and it will cost money too, because we'll need to have staff that will be able to support that new bylaw. That we talk a little bit later on today. I think Dylan's talking about some of those issues later on in the agenda. I think that's a reasonable outcome.
Mhm.
So we can't solve all the problem, but I do think we can put a plan together that we can legislatively be in a much better place in the next year.
All right. CEO,
And maybe just as a final comment, because actually it's very topical, and maybe this is what you meant by I'll speak to someone later, but one thing later on here is in the general report to council on the list of policies and bylaws and dates for them to be enacted in the coming year. This is actually the first version to which we added what was technically the July 27th version, to which we added stormwater management bylaw following on the conversations at the steering team. So the target there to introduce a draft is the 13th of February 2024. So that's what I'm saying is our target. Now, that's based on the idea that we actually pass the planning strategy municipal bylaw, land use bylaw before Christmas. If not, then everything shifts. But if we did, I can imagine introducing a draft as soon as February. So I think to your point, Joe, it reasonably council does mean to have that in place during this time.
also gonna be just in time for the spring rain season.
We got our first big rain in February.
Yeah, you did.
It's not gonna be an immediate fix, but at least we'll see something down the road.
Yeah.
That will help.
Okay. Thank you, David, for coming in.
All right, thanks for your time.
Take care.
Okay, let's go to our correspondence file, number 5. We now have 4 items in that folder. Number 1, the noise bylaw feedback from Chris Soulette. Councillor Carver.
Yes, I'd like to move that we refer that letter to the Policy and Strategy Committee discussion on the noise bylaw coming up at the end of the month, September 26th.
Second that, Mayor.
Okay, all in favor? Motion's carried. The Remo budget, 5.3. Slight increase there in the budget. I think there's a motion in there. Is there a motion? No, you just-
No,
there isn't. Some little-
Information purposes.
I believe there was that at the end of each fiscal year,
Okay.
any unspent Remo funds remain with Remo to be placed in a reserve for emergency spending.
But is that,
That's
yeah,
it.
it's this for approval, I guess, so we do need to approve
That's,
it.
that's, yeah. Deputy Mayor, do you have your hand up again?
Yeah, moving that motion.
And I guess if you don't mind, Deputy Mayor, I guess it would be that council supports the recommendation of the Remo Advisory Committee that at the end of each fiscal year, ... Should we go with making sure that it
Okay.
is logical?
Okay, you've heard the motion. On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. Let's go to Eddie Nickerson.
Mayor, move that we receive and file item 5.4.
Okay, and Councillor Carver.
Are we not going to support that request?
Well, there's the Walker,
5.4?
yeah, overriding the federal and provincial government's taxation of gasoline. It's, you know,
Right.
We did get a motion to get this on the floor, so I don't know if we should we?
we can speak to, if you, would we prefer to speak to it?
Well, I mean, even getting your motion to receive and file on the floor.
Well,
I just
fair
feel
enough.
awkward commenting at all while there's no seconder on a.
Fair enough.
I'll second the motion. to receive,
Okay.
And then I guess what I would say is just to quickly say that the municipality of Barrington frequently, as we've all gotten familiar over the years, they like to say, hey, something could work differently.
Yeah.
And that's often, well, great, I think we might agree, but the mechanism to get there and who could do that and how it could be done is all missing. So I think notionally council could pass a motion to say, you know, we support this, we will write a letter in support of it, but ultimately the chances of them finding a way through to this, you know, obviously Barrington, you know, they just wanted to make their opinion known. And I think you've had something from them probably every 6 months for as long as I can remember.
So there's no action required for that?
So it's pie in the sky and
I mean, again, not to say the council shouldn't write a letter, but I agree with Councilor Feeney. I don't think we will be changing any.
Okay, item 5.5 should be a request for a crosswalk,
Yeah,
not a
that's all.
sidewalk.
Oh, oops, I should have caught that in the approval of the agenda, but we got to vote on the motion to receive and file first.
So receive and file on 5.4.
Yeah.
Dickerson, okay, motion, it's moved and seconded, I think. All in favor? Motion's carried, it's filed. What about the crosswalk?
I'd like to move that 5.5 and 5.5 and 5.6 be received and filed.
Okay, do we have a second? Moved and seconded to receive and file. All in favor? Motion's carried. Clerk, did we fix the problem of that PVSC report being able to be opened?
The link didn't work in the email from PBSC,
Oh.
for the
Hmm.
the attachment from
Maybe,
PBSC.
maybe we should call somebody.
Yeah.
I'll make an inquiry on that,
Send an email.
guys. Be happy to know, 4 years in a row, no budget increase.
Okay, so let's go to staff reports. 6.1, staff reports to council. I'm sure CAO, you will speak to any.
Yeah, haven't been any questions. I guess we'll just acknowledge that this is kind of an odd version because this is your first time receiving the July 27th version that wasn't presented on that meeting, with then updates only to the first section presented. But we wanted to give you the whole thing, even though we normally only give you the first part, because you didn't get any of it on July 27th. So that's why, even though it's the first meeting, you're getting the long version, but you'll get another update of the long version at September 28th.
Try to contain your enthusiasm. Councillor Wilson,
Good advice, your worship. I have several questions, actually. Item 27 is the item about the marinas washer dryer. And what I'm wondering is, I don't understand why we are asking staff to study a town-funded washer and dryer and figuring out about the cost recovery when that wasn't the request of the Marina Group in the first place.
yeah,
My understanding is that motion came as a result of budget deliberations, but as you'll notice, has not yet begun. And what I was thinking is that because we've also been directed to arrange for a meeting between council and the Wood Boat Society, we would have that meeting first. And then if council after that meeting feels, strongly that we don't require this, I'd be happy not to do it. So that's kind of it, but this motion was passed as a result of the budget deliberation. So unless somebody wants to move to rescind, I assume it is still something we're supposed to do, but I would put it below the arrange a meeting with the Boat Society on the order of precedence.
Can I just continue? Under Public Works, item 2, I know that there's, I think, a tender out for exterior renovations to this building.
Well, there was, but that was back in July.
Okay, and the status is, I don't remember that being discussed even at council.
Well, it was, so first off, it was in the budget, and then we reported on it when we talked about the heritage application, which was at the July 27th meeting. But I guess just as comment, we put it out, the proposal that we received, well, the 2 proposals, but the one that was the lower came in much below our budget, and after some verification of different details, it was found to be acceptable. So when we talked about the heritage grant and the motion of council that we explore possible heritage changes to the scope of work on the building and apply for funding for that, the report at that time was that the contract that was worked out with this component was that they were not planning to begin work until April, and therefore we would have the fall to look at the heritage options. And since then, we've actually applied for the heritage funding, and in that process, essentially the way that it works is just, sorry to get a little bit into it, but you have to get a quote from someone to do the exploration of heritage options, the architectural piece, and then they'll cover half potentially the funders, the provincial government will cover half of that cost. So the quote we got on that is $6,000. So now we're waiting, hopefully not too much longer, to get some confirmation on the $3,000. Then we'll begin that $6,000 worth of work. We should have that wrapped up within about a month. That will come back to council, and council will decide, do we ask the proponent on the original renovations for a change order to reflect any of what's been recommended or not? And because we already have a contractor engaged, we'll be able to get change order pricing that we can decide on. So that's sort of the current status of that project.
Okay, I have just a passing comment about the water utility seems to be continuing to deteriorate in terms of how much water we're losing. And this is a question that maybe we could address at the next meeting, is under the bylaw enforcement, which is services number 1. I'm wondering if we could get a summary of the number of tickets, parking and otherwise, that have been issued by our bylaw enforcement officer in the last, should I say 12 months?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to know the types of tickets or just the number of tickets?
I think the types.
So I'll just talk to Al to see if we can like classify. And we don't necessarily have the same kind of classification system the RCMP has, but I'm sure that he can work out some headings. That we can, types of offenses. Okay. Yep. So I'm sure we can do that.
Okay.
Yep.
And just on the water one, I just want to note that's fourth quarter 2023. So that's the previous year. And Scott did mention in the more elaborate report on water loss that we had on the July 27th meeting that his anticipation was Q1 of this year, which should be reported on the September 28th meeting, should show improvement from some of the leaks they got. So I hope it does by the time we get there, but that was what the most recent was on.
Councillor Owens-Croft.
Yes, item 26, with the regards to the pier for fishing, could we have a date associated with that, when they will have this get back to us on how they are going to make room for a fishing pier, or what they're going to do there? That seems to be open, and I'd hate us to miss another summer of people enjoying that kind of recreation.
Well, as to whether we'll miss another summer, I always like to caution that things take a while for municipal government. So
Yes.
even if we do find a solution, implementing it may not be in time for next season. But that being said, number 25 that I referred to with respect to the one about the washer and dryer, which is 27. Number 25 is the one that says request a meeting with members of the Wind Boat Society.
Okay.
And I would see that as happening before 26 and 27, but I think it should strongly inform those two items. But I did want to note that it's not the Boat Society that has held off on making that meeting. They were quite willing. I held off because councillors were clear in wanting an August break. So now that we're back, we'll get that meeting set up and we'll get the potential dates that would work for everybody. I understood it. We shouldn't do it in August because we were taking the month off. So I'm sure we'll get sitting down about it soon, and then you'll have, that's.
Okay, Councillor Owens-Croft.
Yes.
Good, all right. Any other questions for CAO on the report? Okay.
Mayor, I'd move that we accept the report for the month of August and September
For information.
for information.
Thank you, seconded by Councillor Carver. On the motion, all in favor? Motion's carried. Let's go to 6.2, the Anti-Discrimination and Racism Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks to the Deputy CAO for preparing this report. For some of us, in particular the mayor and deputy mayor and myself, who have been at the mayors and wardens meetings for the past couple of years, this has been a long time in coming. And for everybody else, this may be the first time looking at some of these documents. But essentially, what we've got is a county-wide committee and an associated terms of reference and agreement around the hiring of a coordinator that is all coming together now. And what it requires is all 5 units to approve those documents and the associated formula, and everything is in there, including the recommendation motions to do that. But if anyone has any questions on how all this is coming together or anything else associated with the attachments, then we're happy to take them. And if I need to, I'll call on Eric as well. And if you're all good, then the motions are there on the final page there.
Councillor Curley.
In questions that I circulated earlier to the CAO, I did ask some questions about the terms of reference, and My sense is that there is some tweaking that might be useful, some of it's housekeeping. So can we deal with the other two motions and leave the terms of reference to be tweaked by whoever needs to work on them?
So I
Because the
guess-
terms of reference might also need some input from the members when they're actually.
Yeah, I think that would be the main thing, is like, we do need some approval of terms of reference in order to go about recruitment. But maybe we could say, like, for example, motion to approve with the understanding that the terms of reference will be reviewed by the membership once they are appointed,
Okay,
something like that, because, you know, I think everybody's got this version now, so if we get 4 motions that say approve and one that doesn't,
right.
everybody will have to do that again. But I think we certainly would review them with the committee. That's what we did with the accessibility committee.
Yeah, and that would deal with a concern about the terms of reference being developed by 5 CAOs. And without the input of the people who are.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we did have some amendments to the anti-racism or the accessibility one as well.
I keep
Um,
taking the thing off my screen. This way, 1 second, Councillor Carver. There he is, okay.
So I would make that motion then that council approve the attached terms of reference for the Lunenburg County Anti-Racism and Anti-Discrimination Advisory Committee. Should it have advisory in it?
Yes.
Advisory Committee. With the understanding that the terms of reference will be updated when the full membership of the committee is in place.
Okay. Moved and seconded. Council or Deputy Mayor, did you have a comment on this particular topic, or like as a part of the question to the motion?
Yeah, I can say what I need to say with a question. And so I sort of have a strong feeling of deja vu in the sense that everything that Councillor Carver has mentioned, we had talked about the last time this thing came to council. And my question was, did all the feedback we gave not go anywhere? Because nothing has changed in these documents since that time. And I, at least on my part, I talked about a couple of things, which one was that the incoming committee needs to have a say. And for me, a big second one is there's a strong, I guess, difference between anti-racism and diversity and inclusion, and the terms of reference and the document that mayors and deputy mayors are supposed to sign talks about anti-racism and discrimination, and the coordinator being, I think, anti-racism and discrimination coordinator, yet in the person who's being hired, that title changes and the overall, I guess, direction seems to be wavering a little bit. And I'm concerned about that because if you remember, for folks who've been around it a little while, is I believe the consultant who things did not go the way we wanted had concerns about that kind of language. And so I think that should be something that as CEOs or whoever goes to finalize this needs to really think about, because that really waters down what the original intent is. If you're going to, I guess, blur it with saying it's a diversity and inclusion position rather than an anti-racism and discrimination position. So that's on one side. The other side is I don't want to stop the process because I think we're way overdue in doing this. It's been quite a while, but I strongly would urge us to approve with that, I guess, caveat that as a council, we really need those two items looked at.
Okay. CAO?
So I will only just say that we did bring those things to everyone's attention. As far as the difference in the titles, it still baffles me. And Eric's been a part of this process just for a little while, but also kind of, I think we're all feeling it should be consistent. So the second motion is the one on that list of recommendations. The second one is the one that references the title of the position. And so maybe where we have the caveat on this one, that the terms of reference be reviewed by the committee, and then get a caveat on that one, if somebody wants to move it after this one, that says that with the caveat that the position should match the title associated with the committee, or something along those lines. But yes, we did bring forward the inconsistency around the name, and it still is this way. And I don't know that with all 5 people, I'm not sure that we've got a satisfactory answer as to why it hasn't changed, if it's intent or inertia.
Have we voted on the motion? No.
No. This is still question on.
There's still discussion, yeah.
That the deputy mayor was
Yeah.
asking.
Yeah.
Okay, anything further on that motion? Questions called for. Clerk, would you read the motion for us, please?
The council approved the attached terms of reference for the ARA DAC with the understanding that the committee will review the terms of reference once established.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded.
Can I just suggest that once established, the committee will review? Thank you.
Good point. Okay, on the motion, all in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Okay. Let's go to 6.3.
Oh, we've still got 2 more on that item.
I haven't got it in front of me, so.
So the next one is the one where we talked about the caveat around the change of title for that position. Deputy Mayor's stand up.
Yep, deputy mayor.
Yeah, so I'd like to move the council approve the position description and recruitment with a proviso, I don't know what language you'll use, that the title for the coordinator will match what's on the terms of reference.
Second that.
Okay. On that motion. On the question. Do you have a comment, Councillor Feeney, or?
No,
Okay,
supporting the motion.
all in favor? Motion carried. Okay,
And the third one is the one that speaks to the agreement with underlying contribution. And I'll just note that these contributions are in line with our already existing budget approval.
yeah. Councillor Carver.
Well, it's just interesting, there's different terminology.
Is that really in the attachment? Is it using half of each thing? I thought it was the same as the. Is that just a typo, I'm hoping? Because Eric went back and forth so much in writing the 2 different things.
And make it not
No, it
together.
no,
I was accurate.
Okay, so I guess maybe we get this one with a caveat as well. I didn't even realize that they had brought the 2 conflicting titles together in one third title here.
So we're trying to signal our preference for the anti-racism and anti-discrimination.
That's my understanding.
Okay,
So Deputy Mayor's going to stand up again.
deputy mayor.
So I'd like to move that council enter into the intermunicipal regional anti-racism and anti-discrimination agreement with the municipality of the District of Lunenburg, the municipality of the District of Chester, the town of Bridgewater, and the town of Lunenburg.
Thank you. And the councillor, deputy mayor, you speak. to
Yeah,
that?
just on the question, I think one of the things I wanted to clarify is the agreement talks about, I think it's March 2026. And you'd mentioned that there's that discrepancy in dates, and I was wondering why not sync that and correct it now as the agreement is being signed, rather than have that. Maybe I didn't understand it right. Why have that difference between the position and the agreement?
It's to allow for time for recruitment. So the
Okay.
agreement extends a little, I think that one is longer than the other to allow time for recruitment of the position. I
Okay.
can't remember exactly which one was the longer one, but
Okay, so the thought is that the recruitment won't be complete until such a time as then 2 years will take you to the end of the agreement.
that's right.
Yeah.
So like to sync the end of the agreement with the end of the term.
Yeah, I mean, it'll probably take us till April. I guess we'll see, but yeah. So they'll presumably they'll change it if they need to then, I guess somehow, and we'll.
Motion's been moved and seconded. On the question. All in favor? That motion is carried. Okay, I think that's the end of the motions for that one. For 6.2. Let's go to 6.3 and light the town project.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I won't go back through the history here. It is detailed in the report. But we have an update on the Light the Town project and an associated recommendation. And the recommendation includes a scope change with respect to the lighting and associated with that scope change, a request to increase the town's contribution to the project. Happy to take any questions as might arise from this recommendation.
Yeah, I also have a couple questions. So, so I'm okay with the increased budget. My understanding of the original request was really for providing access to electricity to facilitate the town functions. So physically getting electricians to install electrical outlets throughout town that could be used by the MVB and by the chamber and others to plug in power, for a source of power. So that they can string lights and so on and so forth during festivals. So this project won't provide that functionality? I don't believe. Will that request to provide those electrical sources just simply show up next year? And if that's going to happen, fair enough. I wouldn't mind just having that disclosed, and fair enough, as if we're, so it's not really a scope change, that in requirement will show up next year, be my guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to speak to that. I can only say in the conversations with the chamber, it's always been expressed as, we'll do this instead of seasonal lighting. But the chamber is a membership driven organization, so I can't say they won't then come forward and propose seasonal lighting again at a subsequent time. One way to handle that would be if council just wants to get ahead of the installation of fixtures, we can increase the scope even more. We're already up on the poles installing fixtures. If this passes, putting the conduits in is another, I think it was $3,500. So we could do that as well, and that's really just at our discretion. But yeah, either way, this doesn't foreclose on the possibility that will be requested in the future.
And Mayor, my other question is really around not the lights per se, but the efficiency of the lights. So it's a regulated service that the town's paying for, like the actual. I'm out of my depth here about but I'm wondering if these because we've had various councils over years talk about swapping out the actual lights to get to more efficient, more modern, more light for less power being drawn. So it just, if we move forward with this design, does it align with our climate strategy and will we have fancier lights? Fair enough, though I'm sure they'll be beautiful, but will we also find out that on average they draw 5 times as much electricity as a non-fancy light? And I'm just wondering if that's something we've taken a look at.
Good point.
Yes, yeah, they do have basically the exact same characteristics in terms of energy use as the current lights. The only real difference is that because the current, and it's, I'm not technical enough for this either, but my understanding from meeting with Phil and the lighting specialist was that LED lighting, when it first was introduced, there were a lot of complaints about the kind of, the hue of the lights, I guess, the whiteness of the lights. And then over time they have softened, so these are very carefully rated to have the necessary light levels and everything, so there's no concerns there, and I know Phil's verified all that, but they should actually have a slightly more pleasant to most people hue. I guess that's maybe the best way I can describe it, maybe slightly more yellowish than the bluish white. I don't know that everyone. Temperature. Yeah, okay, well, I don't know that everyone will notice. It is supposed to look nicer and still generate the same amount of light for the same area.
So we'll still get the same amount of people.
Yes, and so the only question would be if we did ever extend these to the part of town where we don't have them on every pole, we would have to make sure that they cast the light sufficiently. And again, we can talk about it, they were saying that they should, but this quote is only for the part where we have them on every pole. And so the characteristics then obviously are it's easier to capture the overlapping area of each light without polluting into the windows around it. And then just to say, I misspoke slightly, the cost of the fixtures, if we were to add them, was $8,400 additional. So that's sort of the difference in.
For the whole project?
This is the thing that Joe asked about, if we were to add the conduit with the plugs for subsequent other lighting, then the cost for the 24 locations would be $8,400. But that's not part of the motion.
Councilor Carter,
Thank you.
she's gonna shed a little light on the topic.
Warm or cool? I confess I'm really baffled by this proposal. Which started out as a request for the town to share in the costs of seasonal lights, strings of lights. And I didn't take in the idea that there would be that electrical outlets in various places to plug them in, as Councillor Feeney suggested. I think that's a good idea. But to switch over to these proposed change permanent light fixtures, which in my view get lost in the wiring and really don't create an enhanced effect in town. I don't get it. I don't understand why we would do this. And secondly, does this going to go out to a tender to do the installation of all this, or how do we work that at this point, given that there's a short turnaround?
So the first question is not really a question, but the second question about the tender, I can respond to that if you want.
Yes, please.
Okay. So yeah, you're right to catch on the fact that at this stage, if council would approve it tonight, a tender would have to be run very quickly to accommodate getting them installed. I mean, we could turn tender around within 2.5 weeks, but even that being said, will there be a guarantee these lights will arrive in time for installation? The installation, or the arrival time is 6 to 8 weeks, and that's not locked in until we've gone out and actually chosen I think the main difference you'll get if we go to tender is there'll be proponents offering something with a much longer lead time for a slightly smaller price. And so, we would definitively miss this season to possibly save a couple $1,000. But either way, all you can do is the best you can do. So if we do elect to go the tender route, it will, we'll just see if they arrive in time. And also because these are not seasonal lighting, if they didn't arrive by the 24th of November, I assume we'll put them up when they arrive. So the only thing would be that they might not arrive by the beginning of the Christmas events.
Councilor,
Do we know what led to the chamber changing its mind from seasonal lighting to this permanent type lighting? Was it something?
So
How do you get it in here?
I was asked to sit down with them and they came in and they were, what I can say, and you'll have to talk to anyone directly, really get their mind, but my understanding was that it was about the fact that these would provide a year-round benefit, as opposed to something that would only at most be good for 4 months, and then most people look at seasonal lights as you gotta get them down after 4 months, just like off your house. People don't really think they're good to see them once the snow is melted. So my understanding was that the desire to move to something that would provide a year-round benefit was a motive. Other than that, I can't really speak to why the chamber members prefer one thing or another aesthetically, but.
There's a follow-up. Is this gonna provide more of a benefit? I mean, if we've got the lighting there now, but what kind of benefit is this lighting gonna provide compared to the lighting we had?
I mean, it's debatable. I don't usually like to answer aesthetic questions, right? But there are other communities around North America that have made a big deal of this conversion and switched to this type of light fixtures and said, isn't this an awesome improvement on our downtown business district? It looks nicer and people like it. I'm sure there's some people who don't, so I can't really speak to that. But obviously, the intention is for it to be more visually appealing than existing lighting.
Can the chamber or the supplier provide us with some photographs of before and after light fixtures? I mean, the appearance of these things is the key to the whole project, as opposed to being seasonal or festive or whatever the case is. Perhaps if we could see these lights.
Well, I think
Right
that
here.
picture
Picture right here.
The picture on the attachment.
Yeah, in terms of
Well, I mean-
seeing them at night in a different.
Oh,
community.
yeah.
With the
There's
lights
a
aglow.
community in Florida that touts a very similar conversion on their website, and I can point you towards that. But it's just to see like a picture of a light at night. It doesn't do much to sell me on what the experience of walking down the street would be. I think you have to go there. So unless you're headed to Florida, I can give them the address, but yeah, I don't think.
Can we make a motion to all those?
That's what we'll spend the grant on.
So, okay, if this does come to a vote, I'm not gonna vote for it. It doesn't make any sense to me. But I do want to ask a question about the quality of the light in terms of the no light, what's it called? No light going up and all the light coming down. I'm not sure that this particular fixture looks as if it would do that, but maybe it does claim to.
Yeah, as far as that goes, I know that, as I said, Bill has sat down with lighting specialists. We've been over this, and it was very satisfactory. If anything, I think these are more directed downwards than existing lights. So I really don't believe they would increase light pollution at all. And I do understand that it's been carefully considered whether they would, from the height at which we installed them and everything, provide sufficient lighting for pedestrians and vehicles. So I think on all that, we are confident that they're at least equivalent to existing lights.
Deputy Mayor, can you throw a little light on the topic?
No, I just want to ask a question of clarification. I think, so best, CAO, just help me figure this out. So we're being asked to spend 7,500 more on this project, and potentially we might have to spend 8,200 or 8,400 more if we need to put outlets for a project sometime down the road, potentially. And I'm sort of wondering, for us, does it make sense for us to be doing decorations that are worth $15,000 more in at a time when we actually had to really whittle down our budget so that we could get to where we're going for beautification? I mean, I know it's important, but I'm just curious about that.
Yes, please.
So it's good questions, Deputy Mayor, and I'll touch on some of the info that's in the staff report on that note, because I do speak to that. So, really from a financial perspective, because that's the main thing I think about, the aesthetics, like I said, are not my primary consideration here. I see this as a win-win in terms of the financial versus the original proposal, because we would spend $3,500 a year every year in labor putting up and taking down those lights. So to be able to spend that one time and not every year, that over time, over 3 years, will very quickly be worth more than the difference in the upfront cost to purchase the lights. Additionally, there's less electricity used because we're not adding another set of lights that runs 4 months out of the year. So we're using less electricity, which isn't metered, which is the utility is contributing that. Well, I shouldn't, technically, the town is paying an amount If the board decides to change that amount based on the installation of seasonal lighting, I don't know, but either the utility or the town will be paying less for electricity to have different lights than to have more lights. And the third factor is that we own the lights. So basically, we're spending $17,000 to get $57,000 worth of lights. From that perspective, that's a good thing because we're getting a 70% subsidy on the lights, which are still new lights with the same useful life as the normal light. So basically, we get 24 lights that will be good for another 15 years. If we take out those old lights, we use them as replacements in other areas that prolong the likelihood of replacing the rest of the lights. So I think it's easy to justify from a cost perspective if you don't think it's aesthetically worse and you want to support the chamber asked for. But those last 2 points, those are for you to consider. I will say the chamber, has worked hard to ensure that council, had the info. Like I feel that we have the information to make the decision. If I felt the chamber hadn't given us time or hadn't answered, I feel they've been quite forthcoming about this.
Yeah, so I think that is very helpful, and thank you for that. Then I think for the rest of council, will it be helpful for us to approve this with that proviso? We've done so for a few of these things, that we will not entertain another outlet conduit installation at least this calendar year from the chamber. I'm worried about mission creep, and so if we can, I would be okay approving this if that, I guess, provision is in place that we are not entertaining another installation pretty soon.
Okay, Councillor Wilson.
I think we should leave that for a future council, Deputy Mayor. And I would, at first I was going to suggest what we pass this motion with the add-on of the extra conduit. But then I realized too, as the CAO pointed out, if we have plugins on those trees, we're going to have to go back every year and hang up something that plugs in at a cost of $4,000. So I tend to agree with Deputy Mayor's caveat on this thing. And having said that, I'd like to make the motion, if I may, because I don't think it's been made yet, has it?
Go ahead.
That council approve the proposed scope change and associated increase contribution to the Lake Town project with the MBTCC from 10,000 to 17,500, and direct staff to proceed with the acquisition and installation of the new light fixtures, which I think are lovely.
Okay, do we have a seconder?
I'll
Councillor
second
King?
with one comment, Mayor.
On the question.
So we've had a prioritization of our beautification initiatives all the way since our 100th anniversary. One of the priorities at the time, if you recall, was the replacement of all the lampposts along Edgewater.
Yep.
Through the jigs and the reels and the timing and governing and other odds and ends, we prioritized the cemetery work, the new fence around Bayview Cemetery, and we had to, we couldn't have it all, so we decided we'd rather have the fence really than have the lampposts. But the lampposts they're worse than they were 5 years ago when they were our number one beautification priority. So in a perfect world, I'd rather have $57,000 directed at another project, but that's not the question for tonight. So I do think I do think we should proceed with 75-cent subsidy dollars. So makes good sense. But really, I think fixing those lampposts and doing that conduit work and redoing the rose bushes and all the things that we've been talking about for a couple of years around Edgewater, it's going to come back. So I think when we approve it tonight, I still think that project will continue to be popular in the community. I think people will still advocate for it, and the MBB and the chamber will, and council will. So I take the deputy mayor's point, but I do think those particular lampposts they're due for an upgrade too, just not this year. Maybe not even next year.
Well,
But sometime.
And not to take us too off, because I know we're talking about the motion, but I just wanted to note that is in the budget for next year.
Yeah.
And we have recently got confirmation that we should get approval from the COA for 30% of the costs, and then we will presumably apply to the provincial beautification fund again. That caps at 25,000, so it's not going to be, it's a $130,000 project, but if we did get 30% from ACOA and $25,000 from the province, we'd be getting pretty close to similar.
10,000 from the chamber.
Yeah, we could consider that. What is
Should that be noted as a spoiler alert?
That's right.
Next year? That's right. Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Moved and seconded, all in favor? Motion is carried with 6 to 1.
There might have been two. I don't know. I didn't see the deputy mayor's hand up. Oh, it was that? Okay, it's just one.
I was support.
Okay, thank you. All lights are gonna be up at Christmas time. Updated municipal specifications. I hate to keep going back to pester the CAO, but he's the only one that knows about
There's
this.
a lot of council items coming up, so you guys can talk more to those. So on this one, I think it's quite clear, it's been 20 years since we've updated our specifications. There are a couple of reasons why we might want to now, other than that. And the only thing to note here is that, this wasn't something that was in the budget. And so when I go out and get a proposal or multiple proposals and then evaluate them, I will come back to council to seek approval at an amount, because right now I don't really want to pre-approve an amount. I don't know what kind of costs we're talking about. So if we get them back and they're not something we can accommodate, then we won't be able to do it. So I just wanted to note that I strongly support the recommendation here. I just wanted to be clear, I didn't include a budgetary estimate, which I normally would do, and it's just because I'm not sure what the range of proposals will be, but we'll find out and then we'll discuss it at that time if this motion passes.
Councillor Carver.
I'm prepared to make the motion that council direct staff to issue a request for proposals for update of the town's municipal specifications.
Second.
I'll second that.
By Councillor Wilson.
I have a question.
Okay,
Question is this where the designation of lanes and such might pop up?
Yes, yeah, there's a little reference in there, but it's
Yeah.
a bit opaque. So yes, that's where this would come up.
Can I ask,
Councillor Bowles-Scott.
may I ask, financially, like how much will this cost? Like the road-
It's very hard to estimate.
Yes, but what is a reasonable expectation?
Yeah, I mean, if I just had to guess, I think we're talking about $15,000-$20,000, but the market has been strange, and a lot of what this is drawing on provincial specifications which exist. So, an efficient proposal, I'll be clear, that's what we're looking for, an efficient proposal. Should pretty much just focus the engineer's time and attention on the parts we want to deviate from the provincial specs. And there's not that many of those. I mean, so I would see it as a fairly limited scope. $15,000 to $20,000 is reasonable, but I didn't want to say like, hey, I have something to go by other than my own feeling on this after years of doing it. It's gotten so hard to predict the cost of things coming in.
Any other comments?
It's good.
Okay,
For the better.
yeah, on the motion, all in favor? Motion's carried. Okay, let's go to the water system assessment report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It scanned 232 pages. I hope everybody enjoyed reviewing it.
I didn't read it all.
At the end of the day, this is a very long report that is a requirement, but it only had one recommendation. And the recommendation is what I wanted to emphasize here. The recommendation concerns the staff capacity of our water and wastewater utilities. This is a subject that has come up over the years. The challenge always has been, we have expensive water rates and it's difficult to envision residents paying more. However, as it is laid out here, I'm not sure at this point that it is necessarily a substantial change in water rates we're looking at because of the associated cost of not having more staff. It's actually the wastewater side, if we continue our 50-50 split, that would likely absorb the additional costs. So all that being said, what I'm looking for here would be just to include this in the water rate study But when that came back, and if we said we were applying to the board, at that point, we're essentially saying, well, it would be our intention to include another position in next year's budget. And so if, you know, that's the implication, I'm not trying to hide it. I do strongly recommend, based on this and many other considerations outlined in the report, that it is time to look at a third employee for the water wastewater division. So I would recommend that we be directed to include that in the rate study. And I'll take any questions.
Councilor Wilson.
I don't disagree with that, but I do have a question that's been in my mind for ages, and that is there an opportunity here to create a partnership with Lunenburg on the water treatment piece? Because I know that their equipment is identical. I think it's identical to ours.
Very similar, yeah.
And it's, you know, just down the road, and it seems to me there's always been an opportunity for sharing people in different situations and expertise and so on.
I mean, I guess I'll say the time has never been more appropriate with the swearing in of the new mayor this evening to direct staff to prepare a letter for the mayor to sign to suggest this. I mean, at the end of the day, we'll have an answer long before we would have a great decision from the board. So if council is interested, I don't have a lot of hope based on prior informal conversations that it will happen, but that being said, there are new people involved in the town of Lunenburg, so.
Including the cost, which seems like a reasonable cost in the regulatory filing, I think is table stakes, and we should do that. So I think we should move this along. I guess the question of the timing of the rate study and how long that'll take to get adjudicated. I mean, that we've just been through that on the electrical side. It doesn't happen lickety split. So. And then hopefully we get some more volume to offset it. So at the end of the day, whether you know what the impact on the final water rates will be, who knows? But there are a lot of other costs well beyond this that'll be probably more impactful that I'm sure we'll talk about.
Absolutely, and it's a three-year study process. So we have to project chemicals and you know, energy costs in 2027.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's definitely a complex process.
So when would you see, once the rate study is completed? And if we have a rate that reflects this increment in our staff, is that when the staff would be hired?
So the rate study will inform an application to the board. And if we complete the rate study and are ready to make an application to the board before like the holiday season, which would be my expectation, that application going forward to the board would essentially get us permission, if the board were to approve it, to add another staff person. The other side of which is wastewater, you know, if we're doing a 50-50 share, wastewater being part of our annual budget. So I think what we'll probably get is an overlap between the beginning of our budget process and the board's consideration of our rate application. And so it would be the budget that would contain a proposal to add a new staff person. And then probably in the course of our budget deliberations, we would receive confirmation of the rate filing from the utility review board. So my expectation would be the staff hiring wouldn't take place until at least April. And in the meantime, we'll continue to use AWOC as is detailed there. Unless we had, you know, a push to make that happen soon, right? That's my expectation.
So if the rate study is done on the basis of the 50-50 split or the extra staff, what would happen if we were able to make an arrangement with Lunenburg to the rate study and the recommendations and the proceedings with the board?
So essentially, we're getting the board's permission. So I mean, if we could do something different with the money that they've allowed us to include in the rate, at that point, it's really a question of what would working with Lunenburg look like. It would probably cost the water utility a similar amount, one way or another. So that's where the consideration would be. If it resulted in a windfall for the water utility, where instead of 50%, it was 25%, and then maybe $20,000 of savings, that's just $20,000 of surplus. And most likely some unanticipated cost increase in the cost of chemicals from the US or something will absorb that, unfortunately. So yeah, it would just give us permission. It's just really getting permission to do these things. Yeah.
Have we got a motion and seconded?
I don't think so.
We have the proposed motion, and then we have possibly motion to write to the town of Lunenburg,
Oh,
but none of them have actually been moved.
well. Make a motion.
Councilor now just had a
Oh,
comment.
sorry.
Yeah.
Before,
Well, we're talking about sharing with Lunenburg and that. Is there a benefit to buying chemicals in larger quantities that we could split? If they have the same similar system, they must be using similar chemicals. So could we order larger quantities and share?
Yeah, I mean, it's not really it's a good question. It's not really the quantity of chemicals that are being delivered at one time that would change, because we both have only certain ways of accommodating them. It's the volume of the purchase being made. So there is an opportunity to look at that with Town of Lunenburg. There's also, like, if we ever get, not to go on too much of a tangent, if we ever get to procurement through Municipal Joint Services Board, that is a great example where, especially wastewater chemicals, because even NODL has wastewater treatment in some areas. So at that point, I really hope we'll be looking at countywide procurement contracts. So like multi-year standing offer price, like some things like that. Right now there is an opportunity with Town of Lunenburg, but it will be down to our administrative capacity to make that stuff happen.
Oh, I was gonna make the motion.
So, Mayor's his hand up as well. I don't know if you want to take that first.
for some reason, that screen keeps disappearing on me. Here he is.
Yeah, just jump in. So I mean, I think this is a good move, but for council as a whole, I guess just from very recent personal experience, we need more subscribers to our water system, but our water system doesn't have the capacity to do that. And from my perspective, there are lots of missed opportunities for us to actually be able to take advantage of that. And we need to have a good conversation about how do we expand the capacity of our system so that we're able to get more subscribers to it. For the 3 years we've been on council, we've not had that kind of conversation. And if we don't do any investments that actually do that, then we will continue in terms of costs, our costs will continue going up, but the revenue that we get stagnates, and that's not a very sustainable model going forward. And so maybe for us, we might have to have a focused conversation about the water utility and how can we increase our revenue, which includes increasing our customer base in an aggressive way from my perspective.
And just a quick comment in that regard, because on the August 11th meeting, council embarked on, and we may not receive approval for this proposal, obviously, but we embarked on a notion that we would see the creation of 108. We went with an uneven number, 108. We had a lot of conversation about not going with 100 new housing permits within the next 5 years. I think it was 5 years, 3 years issued, 5 years built. So within 5 years, if we succeed at that, that's 108 additional water customers, which by my read is about a quarter of our water customers. So that would be a huge increase if that's successful. So I think that's a good angle to look at. The whole conversation the deputy mayor is leading into really connects with the current moment around the housing crisis. And it's an absolute win-win. If we can build housing, we can sell water. So there's a great connection there. I think the real lesson would be don't build housing without access to water. But multi-unit is almost always going to depend on access to water, and that's been a big focus of our housing plans to date. So just wanted to add, like, there is a good connection between the different conversations we're having here.
Okay. Yes.
So I'd like to move the council direct staff to include an additional operator shared 50-50 between water and wastewater in the water rate study.
Seconded by Councillor Feeney. You've heard the motion. On the question, all in favor? That motion is carried.
And then Councillor Wilson, did you want, and not that you have to, but did you want to make another motion before we move on?
No.
Oh, he just mentioned earlier.
All righty. 6.6, report of the clerk on the fire services bylaw.
Okay, so public hearing was held on September 12th, 2023 to receive verbal and written submissions regarding the town of Mahone Bay draft fire services bylaw. 2 members of the public were in attendance, 4 members of the public in attendance virtually, 1 member of the public presented, it should be 2 actually, comments to the hearing. 0 written submissions were received prior to the hearing, 0 written submissions were received at the hearing, and the hearing adjourned at 6:50 p.m.
There were 3 presenters. Richard.
Yes, you're right. You're right.
So with that,
Citizen analysis.
so with that report comes the recommendation, obviously, as is always the case with the report of the clerk, to give second reading for the draft.
Make that motion there.
Thank you. We have a seconder to that motion. Councillor Lawrence seconds. Second reading of the bylaw. All in favor?
Oh, no, I'm ready to make a question.
Oh, that's a new.
Or a comment. So we had some presentations tonight that suggested that the fire department would welcome more discussion before the final decision is made. And so my question is it possible to accommodate that request in this process?
Why would we not be able to take?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely council's prerogative, I guess, you know, to suggest whether there's a value in that, I guess I'm just gonna point out that, you know, we did in November of last year, ask the department to engage, presented to the department about it. In July of this year, we received a number of comments back. At the time, you know, staff felt and still feel that it was appropriate to speak to those directly to council, because council should have the advice of staff with respect to the drafting of a bylaw. We did that, and council felt it was appropriate to move the first reading at that time. My understanding of that decision to move the first reading, because we had the opportunity at that time to have another conversation with the department, is that we were moving ahead unless substantial new information came to light. I would say no new information came to light at the hearing. We were told the same things we've been told for a very long time. And I do want to stress that it's been a month since I offered myself to meet with the department directly about any questions and the proposed changes. And that offer was not taken up on until suddenly tonight it was raised that they would have liked an opportunity. So I will say I'm not sure where we go if we don't proceed, but obviously it's council's prerogative to add additional steps to this process.
Councillor Feeney?
Mayor, just to refresh everybody's memory, so we originally started the process, well, at least a year and a half ago, but it was on November 8th of 2022. We started the consultation process with the fire department. We had first reading on the 18th of July. We had another discussion on the 27th of July, and then there's been that 6-week period, including this evening, to provide feedback. And you know, council does have, as you see tonight, a very busy agenda. At some point, occasionally we need to just to move them along, you know, not comparing these, you know, we may not have perfection, but at least we have a bylaw in place that I think is a huge improvement. It's not crystal clear to me what further improvements can be made. And some of the requests we know after because we've talked about this for so long, we know cannot be provided. So in the absence of, I think, being in a position to provide any substantial satisfaction on some of the points, the contentious issues, I mean, I prefer to move it along. And then if there are amendments or changes to the bylaw, we can make those periodically, but after the bylaw is in place.
Okay. Councillor Lawrence-Croft.
It is my hope and my understanding that we can have conversation with the fire department at any time. I don't think it has to be exclusive to this, but I think hearing what we heard this evening, I think we should try and make an effort to, in the next 6 months, have some kind of conversation with the fire department. And it can be a very casual conversation. It could be just attending one of their regular business meetings and being present there. I don't, you know, it doesn't have to be really big formal, or even a couple of us going every now and then to a fire department meeting and just hearing what's, if there are any issues or whatnot.
Counselor now.
Yeah, I don't believe this is the right fit for the bylaw. I believe we should have a bylaw, but I think it goes into too much. As I said in my public comments, the fire department has existed for over 100 years now, and we've never had this, and we've come along quite well. I think we have to take into account what the chief said here tonight about not knowing what the managerial role is for him as stated in the bylaw. And until we have that meeting with the fire department and clarify some of these things, I can't support the bylaw. It's just not the right fit. And I hate to see us, get such good relations with the fire department. I hate to see it start to dwindle.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Wilson?
Yes, I'm not quite sure how to frame this, but my discomfort level with this bylaw has been pretty constant throughout, but it's less to do with the wording and the detail than it is about the fact that this bylaw is something that didn't come from the fire department itself, but it's been something that was given to them to react to. And I understand the reasons for it and why we would like to have a bylaw, but I think it needs work. I think it needs considerable tweaking and adjusting and thinking. So I'm with Richard.
Okay. Anything else on the question? CAO?
I'm just going to note again that we've had more than a year to hear about any of the considerable tweaking and edits that are being suggested without being proposed, and I haven't heard them. So, yeah, I think we're at a point where we don't have any line of sight on any further changes, and that's usually when you would move ahead with the bylaw draft.
Councillor Longstreth.
Would it be appropriate for me to ask Councillor now, do you know why people haven't come forward? If there seems to be a fence within the department, why haven't people come forward? Are they what's stopping them from expressing their concern?
We had meetings on it, a number of meetings actually, and we did present some of those things that were just on the bylaw. Some of them were brought in, some of them weren't. And I just think that they just did not know the process. And so therefore they have not come forward. And, I think a lot of them are like me that, they can see the reasoning behind the bylaw, but they are not sure of the necessity of it, where we've existed for so long. And there are a lot of things in there that seem like and this is in their mind, not necessarily my mind, but I think a lot of them feel that this is being put to the fire department and that it's a way of the town trying to control the fire.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it is, but that's a feeling that is being, from what I'm getting.
Did you say trying to control? Is that what you said? Okay.
Deputy Mayor, you have a comment?
Yeah, I have a comment. I think, so I empathize with the folks who might be reluctant or might feel that engaging with the process might be a challenge. But if you don't engage with the process, then you find yourself, maybe they will feel that they're being victimized, but I don't think that's the intention of council in this particular case. Like the CEO has mentioned, this process has been going on for quite a while, and we've had lots of opportunity in many ways to get feedback to our table. Tonight was a perfect example where even in the public information portion of this, I did not get, I guess, specific, other than the question from the fire chief around just he needs an understanding of what the role is. There was not specific opposition to some clauses. So similar to what we were doing with the noise bylaw. The noise bylaw folks actually came and sort of said, I have an issue with X, Y, Z, and we had to go back and redo that. With this particular one, I haven't seen that, and so I'm wondering, is it that there's something we're missing that folks don't, there's something so big that folks don't want to bring it to the table? I would say if it's actually that big, then you actually need to bring it to the table. And so I mean, I empathize that there might be concerns, but I think getting this out there and having a bylaw, if it needs to be changed, that doesn't mean that if you have a bylaw, it can be changed. If there's something that actually impacts them negatively, we can always come back to the table and change it. We're not, I don't think we're forcing something on them. That's not how I view it. It could be.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Carver, you all right?
Yeah, allergies, I'm sorry. The risk, as Councillor Wilson alluded to, is the alienation of the councillor now. The risk of alienation. If we feel that there isn't a real sound understanding, and my sense is that it's more than just tweaking. It's I don't know how we get around it, how we address it, that feeling, because the town needs to have a structured policy in place, and the fire department wants to be assured about their autonomy and their professionalism and so on. The best idea I can think of is to sort of use somebody like Will Brooke in Lunenburg, who's a firefighter and who I believe believes in bylaws. I don't know, involving him in the discussion as well as a resource. I mean, I believe that we need the bylaw, but I also believe that we need a fire department where members feel respected, empowered, valued, and that they understand and are prepared to buy into it. The CAO is trying to get your attention.
So if I could just say, I think if second reading were to pass, obviously it would be a good idea to immediately have a session to inform the fire department members that the bylaw has passed. And it's a great opportunity to talk about any questions or concerns that might come from that. So as I did offer following first reading, that my intention would be to immediately offer following second reading, that I'll happily attend a meeting, sit down with them, have a special meeting at one of the regular sessions, whatever, in order to talk about the implementation of the new bylaw now that it has, if it has been passed. And obviously members of council are welcome to come to that session, to Suzanne's point about, people can just come to meetings. So I think, if we go ahead for the reasons that have been discussed tonight, we don't have to feel that it's unsupported. The challenge has been that those offers have been consistently rejected.
May I just ask who you made those offers to?
Chief.
Okay, I'll check with him in the morning.
Okay. We've had the fire department for 100 years.
103 now.
103. Got the new fire hall built. We've got this second reading tonight. Would it really hurt for it to wait for 2 weeks or 3 weeks? And allow an opportunity for council to say to the fire department, we're going to come to your house, your firehouse, and you can tell us what the issues are for you. I don't know, I mean, we probably wouldn't make a hell of a lot of difference for some people, but some it might.
I would support that idea of postponing the second reading. And sending an email to every member of the fire department individually, in very clear way, simple, not long, explaining the need, our willingness to engage, and
why we need this bylaw.
and that would be another, that opportunity then to provide more input at the second, we've already had a public hearing. We have to have another.
We
public
already had
hearing.
this proposed meeting last November.
Well, at any rate, then I guess my basic idea in there is a public outreach to each individual member with an email somehow in the mix.
Councilor Queenie?
So, nobody wants to alienate the fire department or its members. I mean, certainly nobody around this table. But we are a government that is required to follow government processes, one of which is the bylaw process, which started in November of 22,
Yeah.
which only started after 18 months of consultation and back and forth meetings, of which many of us attended. As a preamble, we started this process in the old fire department. The new fire department hadn't even been built yet when we started this. At some point, there needs to be a recognition that as stewards of the municipality, we require a bylaw as good governance. We're talking millions of dollars of assets, lots of liability, and the bylaw also protects the members of the department. Now, there is language and terminology like town manager that is used in the bylaw, which might be confused to someone who doesn't get T4 income and doesn't get a check from the town every second Friday to view, am I an employee of the town? But we've had the benefit of having those discussions for quite a while. We understand like why we use language, why there's a legal terminology inside the bylaw that's used. And maybe it is confusing, but it's certainly only to the benefit of all concerned. What I'm worried about is that this is the second time we've come to second reading in these processes in the last month and a half and made decisions to defer. I think that can be a wise decision if you think that inevitably the bylaw will improve through further consultation. I'm just not of that opinion. I know we have a difference of opinion on 3 or 4 small items, but I don't believe we're going to resolve those difference of opinion. And I don't believe that we have another 3 or 4 conversations that we are not going to come into an agreement with the fire department about how they want to discipline their members. We have a difference of opinion about how that will get adjudicated.
Mm-hmm.
We've had the conversations and we have a difference of opinion. So I see no way to resolve that difference of opinion. So at some point, you have to realize, is this a hill to die on tonight? Or are we going to leave the town exposed by not having the town protected by having no bylaw for another 6 months until we inevitably get back here again, which will require many meetings and another public meeting, which will have to be met. So at
There's
some
no guarantee, I think you're suggesting.
right,
that's gonna change.
or we could just kick the can down the road for another year and let the next council, deal with that.
Yeah.
So I know it's not perfect, but it is time to do it. And if we need to make changes, we meet once a month at the strategy and policy meeting, and we talk about changes to bylaws every month, and we can have this a standing item on the agenda until the issues are one by one dealt with and resolved. But I really think that the town is exposed quite substantially by having no bylaw in place. The fact that we haven't had one in 100 years, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't have had one 50 years ago. Anyway, thank you very much for the indulgence.
Thank you, Councilor Queenie. Anyone else have any other comments?
May I just ask, do other municipalities, they have bylaw, fire bylaw?
As Joe pointed out, such a long history, you're coming into this a bit late.
Well, yes, I
So
know.
towns generally do, or in Maureen's process, because this goes back to when Maureen was the clerk, and she spoke with every town, and a couple of them don't, and they're working on, and they're very much in favor of having them.
Mhm.
So, that's the general sentiment. Outside of towns, absolutely they don't, or very, very rarely, and if they did, it would look totally different. because the departments are independent of the municipality. And to Joe's point about protecting both parties, in those cases, what they do is they distance themselves from the operation of the fire departments. We can't do that. It's a town department. We can't say, oh, well, that's not our department. That is our department.
Okay,
So the motion is on the floor.
that's right. On the question, and further,
I wanted to ask, if I may, ask the CIO again about his proposal to, or the idea of if we pass second reading tonight, then that doesn't preclude the opportunity to meet with the department and talk some more in the hopes of better understanding. Was that?
Well, what I said was that as I did do after first reading, I would immediately offer the chief that I will come to either a special meeting of the department membership or a regular meeting of the department membership in the near future to discuss implementation of the bylaw and answer any questions about that. And the council members are, as you've done before, and the mayor
Yeah.
pretty much always does, if we're talking about town stuff in the fire department, can come to that meeting.
Hmm.
I wouldn't say it's a proposal for a meeting between council and the fire department, or
No,
at least that's not my
yeah.
suggestion.
Yeah, when I hear that, it sounds a little bit top down. I'm coming to tell you about how it's going to be done. That's how it comes across, and I don't, maybe the fire department members feel that too, I don't know. Talk to Wilbrook. See if he can. I think he'd be a valuable
Okay.
resource.
we do have a motion on the floor. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. Motion's carried. All right,
Yeah, fine.
and 3 hit.
And I'd like to make them, may I make a motion to,
Deputy Mayor, I didn't see your vote.
You did it.
He voted for it? Okay, so it's 5-2.
I would like to make a motion that we make an effort to leave it open. I'd like that suggestion with the policy and strategy meeting open. Time to talk about the bylaw, the new bylaw, in case there are changes, and that we, in the next 6 months, have meetings with the fire department. And we can make details on what they will look like, but I would like them to be more information, maybe having Dr. Brooks come and speak with them. I think he's well known to firefighters across the country. And also Dr. Brooks. And also, I don't want them to be really formal. I agree, it shouldn't be top down, other than the process that Gillen CAO normally follows after a bylaw is enforced and information session. But I would like to see more, let's have pizza with them at the fire hall and have some discussion, open discussion, and not necessarily people have to stand up in a room and talk, that they can talk quietly and. That's a long motion. isn't it?
I don't think there's no way she's even gone. So would the motion maybe just be to add discussion of engagement with fire department to the policy and strategy for the agenda, and then we can talk about
Okay,
everything you just said, we could talk about it.
that's fine. I agree.
Do you have a seconder?
Oh.
Thank you. Constantine, all in favor? Motion's carried. Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor. It's 9:10. I would suggest maybe we want to take 10 minutes and have a glass of water. Smoke them if you got them outside.
We've only got that far. Oh my God.
Yeah, Deputy Mayor, you're gonna be leaving us?
Yes, Deputy Mayor.
I think I'm done for the night, unfortunately.
Got more important things to do.
Yeah.
It happened. Well, thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Oh,
Yeah, so there's a motion that I think Kelly can move for me.
Comfortable with that?
I don't know what it is.
I think it was
The
to
ladder
direct
truck.
staff to work with the fire department concerning their proposal, I assume. Francis?
Oh, the ladder truck.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, that ladder truck. Oh, okay.
ladder truck thing, yeah.
Okay. Don't worry.
You wanna
It's in
put
good
us
hands,
on,
man.
Thank you. See you folks. Have a good night.
Move on.
What happens when
Item number 7.1 is a quickie. As you're all aware, Lunenburg the citizens have chosen a new mayor, Jamie Myra. Stan's Dads and Lads in particular, you might know him from there. He's the owner of the shop. I've been over to see Mayor Myra on a couple of occasions, but wasn't able to actually make contact with him. But I thought it's appropriate that we would extend our congratulations to him. We're looking for some renewed vigor in discussions with the Mahone Bay. And perhaps a note on town letterhead, congratulating him on behalf of council.
Yep.
Wishing him good luck and cooperation between our two councils.
Somebody want to make that a motion on behalf?
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Carver, all in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Item number 7.2 is the Joint Services Board intermunicipal agreement review. Something in accordance with the initial municipal agreement is supposed to be done on a fairly regular basis. I think 218 was the last time we actually had any changes to it. You have a copy of the proposed one. What is your will?
And just to clarify, we were asked, each of the towns was asked to consider if we had any requested changes. So there
board
will,
hasn't
I'm
seen
sure,
it
be
yet.
proposed changes from the board, and we're not being asked to confirm a draft now. That will come later. This is at the preliminary stage. Do we have things that our council felt needed changing in the agreement? So you've got the agreement as it stands in Leslie's report, and we could take until our next meeting of council if people feel that they would need sufficient time. But then I think that's pretty much the time that we have, because the drafting is there's a session scheduled to start in October. If we don't have any comments, we don't need to belabor it. We can just say we're good.
Are we satisfied with the IT portion? of
Well,
that?
I guess it's as pertains to the agreement itself. So I mean, I'll say, I don't think we're satisfied with the IT service, but as the agreement lays it out, the only thing that I would like to see changed is an application of a formula on the cost sharing of the IT. And that's already on the radar. So I guess we could pass a motion saying we'll convey that so that like we just make it formal. But certainly when they came and spoke to us in July, they did stress that that was on their radar. And that would be my only concern in the agreement with respect to the IT service. And then obviously we need to continue to work with them to make sure we're getting good value for the service, which is,
Yeah, the allocations and the equation.
yeah, exactly, because there is an opportunity, I think, to improve the cost allocation and to bake it into the agreement. But it's just a question whether we want to re-articulate that they did mention they were aware of and looking at.
Well, yeah, and I'm participating in a meeting on Monday over there talking,
Finance?
yeah, with kind of a similar conversation about new arrangements with the non-partner customer base, which will obviously benefit the town as well. So
Lisa's
I
been
mean,
doing a lot of work on that.
I think the one takeaway on the topic, Dylan, I think it's a fair point. I think we all agree as we saw the presentation about the increased cost structures. Some of it is kind of a one-time, and some of it's really baked in. They're going to seek to make improvements. I fully believe that. But I mean, as far as any other changes from council, I think this is in fairly good order.
We saw where things were running as well
Yeah.
and as profitably as NJSB's operations seem to be.
Can't wait for the procurement function to roll out. That will really be a big help.
So I suppose technically either way, regardless, we should probably get a motion saying council considered this and didn't have additional feedback or wanted to highlight the issue of IT cost sharing. Okay.
Thank you. We have a seconder. Councillor Feeney. On the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you.
And then obviously, if anyone thinks of something, they should send it in to me or Leslie. You don't have to hold it now for another 5 years.
Okay, let's go to Deputy Mayor Gavin ladder truck petition.
Now in the hands of Councilor.
Councillor Wilson.
And I must confess, I have no idea what his issue is.
So we had a presentation, if you don't mind.
I'll move on.
We had a presentation from the department back in July.
Yeah.
And because it was a presentation, it was now 6 weeks ago, but it was at our most recent regular meeting. That normally at the next regular meeting is when you can make a direction to staff to say, are we going to consider this proposal? My understanding, I think that we very confirmed it in the sign off, was that he wanted to make a motion to say that staff are directed to work with the department to consider the proposal and bring forward a resulting recommendation to council. Which would be my way of tracing that.
I love you. I'm with that.
Kelly, did you get it?
No, I didn't, I'm sorry.
Are you okay to just work with me after?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
If everybody else felt like you understood it, if you.
I think this idea has a lot of merit. A lot of tangential benefits here and you get a much better cadence on replacement. And then, of course, you get the functionality as well. But there's also a subtle nuance around private sector donations that would need to occur as well. So I think, I'd like to second that motion. I think we can get the right arrangement. This could maybe be a really good idea.
I think the
A couple checks too.
department, what they were really looking for in this is just that the council was willing to support them in the idea of researching it, because they don't want to go through a whole bunch of work. And then all of a sudden the council says, no, we
We're
can't
not
do that.
interested.
We're not interested. So I think that's basically what they were looking for. Not necessarily saying that we're gonna get this truck, but they want to be able to examine possibilities
Look
on
through,
getting an aerial ladder truck. Because let's face it, town's growing and it's growing up, not growing. So,
Well, some of
it's
us
something
are
running-
doing that.
well, I'm talking about properties, not people.
Okay. Okay, on the question, we have, who made the motion?
I did.
You did, and Councillor Feeney, you seconded? Okay, all in favor? Motion's carried. Let's go to Councillor Wilson again. Oh, the Derby Twins, go ahead.
Okay, I'm not sure how exactly to phrase this, because I know it's being looked at in this whole study that we already agreed to. But I was trying to come to a way of ensuring that laneway that goes up to the solar garden becomes an official road of some sort. Now, I think it's going to we're going to end up having a category of road called lanes eventually. And probably, Mr. Mayor, your road, which is a narrow extension of Fairmont Street, would become Fairmont Lane, for example. And et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't think there's a need for a motion as long as we're all clear that that's the direction we're heading and that the result will come out in this soon to be finished study.
CAO.
So I think that the municipal specifications, my expectation they will establish a category of roadway that is able to accommodate two directional traffic on a one-lane road. And that's one of the main considerations around this laneway as it advances becoming a public road. The other consideration there is grade. And so I did want to note that my expectation around grade is for everybody's context, and having reviewed this around the country and having looked at the Transportation Association of Canada, Sam, is even though I'm not an engineer, I have consulted with Strum Engineering too, because they did a report previously on this specific laneway as part of the solar garden. Typically 15% will be your maximum grade on a low traffic road, with the caveat that it could exceed 15% if the local fire department, because this is in the building code, or the fire code rather, if the local fire department says that they would still be able to service that property. So essentially what it comes down to is that if somebody were trying to build and they needed a fire sign off on building, so if we get our new planning strategy together, and then to get your permit, you have to have frontage on a public road, and we say, okay, it's a public road. And they say, okay, well, the town says it's a public road, but the fire inspector will still have to confirm that either the grade is below 15% or the fire department is signing off. So specific to this one road, I guess it might be an opportunity to question, and we talked a lot about the fire department this evening. What would the fire department's position be on that? Because I will expect that what we'll get in our specs will be 15% or more only with the sign off of the fire department. And we know that grade there is 18%, that's fine.
Yeah. Well, just to that point, they better sign off because you get $7 million worth of stuff up on the top of that hill, all of which can catch fire.
So a laneway doesn't have to meet the same grade requirement. It's a laneway, that one property is okay. It's just if it's a third party, but I take your point.
And further to that, we have had fires on that quote unquote laneway where we have.
Yeah, right where the solar panels are now, yeah. So I only raised that just to point out that at the very least, whether it's direction or not, I better be assuming this will come around when the time comes and we have the standards. I better be working with the department to ensure that we have an answer to that. And that answer satisfies our fire inspector over this college. Which is just good information. It's something to look at. I don't necessarily need direction on it, but I did want to note that because that's sort of the one thing that'll come back to possibly delay this approval process.
So the land use bylaw process, which I think is inextricably linked to these conversations, really, I think we all came to the same conclusion at the end that we have a challenge if we have municipal standards that really precludes a lot of construction that would otherwise occur through laneways. So specifically, there is an item within the staff package that talks about requests that come to council periodically from the adjacent landowners on that property. With the intent of being in a position at some point to subdivide the property and have access to a road so that they could build a home up there. And I think it's council's kind of intent to support that. I think reading the room historically. So I know we have moving parts and I know there's a circuitous route to make this happen through a number of bylaws and or sign-offs. But are we heading to a point where we think we could let folks know that at some point in 2024, they may be able to do that if they wanted to? Or do you think there still are other issues that should be brought to council's attention that may preclude that, which is fair too.
Do you mean with respect to this specific lane?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we can, knowing all of this is in the background, council can direct staff to begin the process to open that laneway as a public road at any time. I mean, the need to establish municipal standards speaks more to telling other people what we would be willing to accept, whether we've established the standards yet or not. We being the owner and the regulatory authority can move ahead at any time.
No, fair.
Short of doing that, I think
Right.
it is premature to say that we will do it because the land use bylaw part is very much open to public feedback at this point.
So one last point, Kelly, thanks. So fair enough, I'm, not trying to solve the entire problem tonight, but I think that there is an open request to council. And I believe it's on the agenda, it's in the meeting package saying that we're going to deal with it by October of 2023. All I'm saying is that if there's some reason why we couldn't deal with it by October 23, just let's let the people know formally and make sure that everyone knows whether we're working on it and with the hope it can be resolved, or we've concluded that it cannot be resolved because of some other issue.
Councilor Wilson.
So let me understand what the CAO was saying is that we can at any time create a motion to make that road up to the solar garden a public laneway or public road of some sort. Except not right now.
No, we can do it right now.
Okay.
Yep. The only thing is that, we would apply to this one what I know to be the likely expectations that would apply to other cases because we're the owner.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. I mean, if somebody came to us and said, I want to establish a public lane on my property, right now, we don't have anything to give them and say these are the standards associated with public lane. But whatever the standards are, we can do whatever we want to. We have other lanes in town that have been established that clearly don't meet the requirements of the roadway now. The only thing that and the current bylaw would not, there's no change needed to the bylaw. If the road were public now, they could build now, like there's no, the bylaw change doesn't actually have anything to do with that. It's just that once the bylaw changes, it would absolutely shut the door on any kind of development not on a public road or lane. So at the current moment, if we made the change to status of the roadway, the property owners are good to go. And the bylaw change won't stop them, but it's not necessary for them to get a permit to develop. So the only real issue that I see if council would direct staff to begin the process to open it as public road is that issue around the grade and the fire service and the, we don't make it a public road, tell them, go ahead and build, then they apply, and the first thing that comes up is you can't get your fire inspection sign off because of the grade.
Yeah, good point.
But that's something where a motion direct staff to begin the process means I'll come back with whatever the next steps would be. So I assumed that you were probably gonna make that motion tonight, but you don't need to. I mean, that's up to you.
No, well, I was, but the other piece got in the road. But I think, given what you just said, that I would make, I will put it on the agenda for our next meeting. That will be a motion for that particular road.
Okay. Councilor
I'll wait till the next meeting to ask the question.
Okay, what about flashing lights at crosswalks?
Yes, with all apologies, to Councilor Carver, this was coming from a lot of complaints I've had for months and months and months about, everybody getting life-threatening incidents at our crosswalks for various reasons. And it occurred to me that although a lot of people don't push the button for flashing at the bottom of the hill on Edgewater Street, seem to have been very effective, and that it would be worth the money to do that at all of our crosswalks. With probably the exception of the one with the salt box, because that's already a three-way stop, so.
They don't stop. They roll through.
I've seen them on coming down that hill.
Well, I must have.
I saw a guy on 10 CB bike almost hit a woman who was crossing the street and she had the lights flash. He's on his bicycle. And
Anyway,
he's quite
okay,
indignant.
well, we'll include that one too.
Yeah,
in my motion.
no, I mean, it's.
So my motion is to put that in the budget for next year,
All crosswalks be lighted.
equip with those flashing lights.
Yeah.
All of the many crosswalks.
So, yeah, I
think
want to
there's
comment,
seven.
but if it's a motion, you made it a motion, we should get a second here before we talk about it.
Yes.
Seconded by Councilor Now.
So for clarification, mid-block crossings are the ones that typically have RFPs. So there's no stop sign. So if it's a stop controlled crossing, you wouldn't normally have the RFPs, what those lights are called, rectangular rapid flashing beacon. So, do all the mid-block crossings would be, I think we've got 6 of them that don't have them now. Do all the crossings would be like hundreds, like every place where there's a stop sign. And I don't think that's probably what you meant.
No, I did not.
The addition of the Clearway and Main intersection, I think using an RFP there would actually make it more confusing to motorists. Unfortunately for us, in terms of cost, the next step up from what we have is a signalized intersection. And that, it's $40,000 to $80,000, but we really, if we don't think that the stop sign is working, I don't know where else you go other than enforcement, which is said many times.
It's like the
Adding the flashing beacon at a stop sign is not conventional. I don't not to say it's going to create a liability, but it might.
That's not a great idea.
But certainly the motion as it stands to get the cost in the budget for the other 6, I think it's 6 locations. That's simple enough to do, and it's about $9,000 each at this time, so I don't think it's going to break the bank. It certainly would be, from a traffic authority perspective, an enhancement of public safety.
All right, sounds good. Let's vote on that. There,
I think 6 is.
We have a motion,
We do, yes.
do in a second.
$9,000 for,
Her.
okay. Who seconded the motion? You did. All in favor? Motion's carried.
Thank you.
Okay, Suzanne, and the signage at the visitor information center.
Yes, you've seen the package and we have met and we have the approval of the Acadia First Nations. That for the Mahone Bay Tourism and Chamber to erect the sign that you see in the photo. It's a mock-up, but it is the 4-point star. It's very much an important symbol for the Mi'kmaq. It will look mostly like this. This is a mock-up, but we would like approval for the town that we can go ahead with erecting this at that garden that was designed this time.
That a motion?
Yes.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded.
And I'll just quickly note that I had been asked and did confirm that only council approval is necessary. There's no other permits from development services that are required. So if this is okay with council, then it's okay. I just wanted to make that clear.
It's actually a pretty good logo.
Yeah.
We should have got them working on the other one. Anyway, you heard the motion on the question. All in favor? Motion's carried.
And
Good.
as a side, I'd like to say that Acadia Nations has changed its name, and I don't know if you have received, they are now using the Mi'kmaq word instead of Acadian First Nations. So
What's the word?
I cannot remember the correct enunciation of it. So
Okay.
but it has changed, and I think they'll be promoting that in the future, and we should be aware of that change.
Yeah.
Maybe clerk, we can get that for the minutes of the meeting.
Yeah, as of now, their website and everything's still.
Yeah, I tried to look it up beforehand, but it hasn't, all this hasn't been updated, but it was
Okay.
approved at their general council just recently. And that was brought up at our meeting.
Good. Councillor Carver, item 7.7, public information discussion session.
Yeah, so information was included in the package, and the reason I made the suggestion about holding public information discussion sessions is just being aware that people ask questions about these things and they don't get it. So I just would like to refer the idea of holding, this is a motion, that council refer the idea of holding public information discussion sessions to the Policy and Strategy Committee for consideration.
Second that, Mayor.
Okay,
This is in no way against the motion, but I just wanted to note that we do, and I've noted this before, just for anyone listening, we do, I think, on average, hold at least one public engagement on some subject every month. It's just that that's almost always linked to the timeline of a particular project or otherwise, but.
To be discussed further.
Yeah.
Thank you.
okay. Could you read us the motion, clerk, please?
That council refer the idea of holding public information discussion sessions to the Policy and Strategy Committee for consideration.
Okay. You've heard the motion? All in favor? Motion's carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to committee reports, 8.1. You've got the information in your package. Does anybody have any questions?
There's a lot of cocaine around.
Pardon me?
A lot of cocaine in that report. My goodness.
Okay, 8.2, the Lunenburg County Senior Safety Program. Any questions? Okay,
8.3 for the first time, soda on our agenda.
SOTA stands for
So, actually, it should be SS.
So-
South Shore Open Door
We just talked
Association.
this morning about all the acronyms of South Shore and.
Okay.
NNS.
South Shore Open Door Association.
Can I ask a question about, there's 3 or 4 different organizations. Where are they getting their information on who's homeless? Because the numbers seem to change
Oh, well, the South Shore Open Door Association is, it's like the portal for people who are homeless to, or housing precarious, to bring their situation and to be provided with information, support, assistance in finding resources.
I thought I saw a report that there are 14 people homeless in Mahone Bay.
The report in this South Shore Open Door Association report said that 15 of their number are from Mahone Bay. People who are precariously housed or homeless.
Okay. It just seems,
Unbelievable, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
Where are they?
underhoused, that's true, all kinds of underhoused.
Precariously housed.
Yeah, I think it's all in the definition. Because
Yeah.
in rural areas, homelessness almost always means staying with someone or staying in an RV with.
And it actually at the South Shore Housing Action Coalition the other day, the SODA staff were reporting, and it was really heartbreaking. They're reduced to giving tents away, and the United Way is helping them with that, funding tents. That's all they can do. I mean,
Oh, boy, I don't know.
it's
So any other questions on the soda report? Policy and Strategy Committee, the draft minutes from the July 23rd meeting.
Was there anything there?
No motions, but I did want to jump in and this would be an opportunity to approve the agenda for the upcoming
Yeah.
meeting in September, and we've added a few things to it. And I don't think we really realized that we did. So when we last met, and you'll see in here, we said that the discussion would be about the HR manual. But then subsequent to that, we referred the noise bylaw here, and we've had some conversations about other possible subjects tonight. So I'm going to suggest that we defer the HR manual till October because it's less timely than the noise bylaw, and then maybe if Suzanne and Penny, if you want your pieces to go on this next one with the noise bylaw, I think they could. And then in addition to that, I want to ask, can we confirm that I could invite Robert to speak for 15 minutes to the Savonis pilot? Because I sent an email out, but only a couple people responded.
Yeah.
And I just wasn't sure. I need to confirm with him, even if he's going to attend, he'll just attend remotely. But
I missed
do you want to hear more about it?
Who's Robert and who wants to go?
The Savonis pilot is, so it's a pilot of a decision-making tool. It could potentially apply to the noise bylaw situation. And if we're willing to hear him out, he's just wanting to come and present about it. But I just didn't know whether I should invite him because I didn't get a majority of councillors responding. So, what's that?
I don't remember seeing it.
It was an email I sent out maybe 2 weeks ago. I was just saying that there's a pilot of a decision-making support tool that is intended for communities grappling with, an issue that has like substantial, encampment of opinions that people are strongly for or against, and it's creating tension. And this is supposed to be a way to help not just force something through. And since we've now gone back to drawing board, I thought it might be a good opportunity to think about whether that might apply, because it's a pilot and it's for you to try it. But ultimately, if he presents on it, that's not committing us. I just, I don't know, if you could say no.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to sell something here. I think it's a
good idea.
answer. So if you're good with that, it's intended would be noise bylaw with a presentation from Robert, and then the items that have been referred tonight. And that would be, if someone wants to, maybe we should make a motion to say that's the agenda for the.
But having Robert speak is really going to use up the time for the noise bylaw.
Well, it's a 90-minute meeting. He'll only present for 15 minutes at most. So I guess it's a question of. I thought we put that at the top of the agenda, thank him, and then.
Well, we'll see what we can do with it.
Why don't we just do noise bylaw?
Yeah, we could just, I mean, if you think those other two pieces we won't have time to get into them, we could just.
We'll have our packages on hand in case there's time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then I guess the motion should just be for now, set the agenda as a noise bylaw.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I think it's better to have noise bylaw.
Yeah.
Okay.
If somebody wants to make that motion though, because the last thing on the record said the HR manual is the agenda.
So moved.
Okay.
So moved. Do we have seconder? Counselor Now, all in favor? Motion's carried.
All right, Eric, you've got at least one more month before we talk about the HR manual.
Excellent.
Lunenburg County Senior Safety Program monthly report. Any questions on that?
No, I move that we accept the report as written.
Oh,
Except all the reports as presented?
sure.
If you want.
Well, we do. what you-
Okay, other months we done it
Yeah, we
individually. so-
sometimes do, we sometimes don't.
Except them for information.
I think they're just information. I don't
Yeah,
think
that's
that.
great.
I just want to make a point about the 8.5, this, for the senior safety, that, do we have the poster available here?
I haven't done anything with it yet.
Okay,
but I
okay, but
do.
you do have it, then it's available.
Yeah.
And if any of us could post it also on the Facebook page.
Mhm.
It's a really good series of sessions.
So that concludes our agenda. How many folks do we have still with us at home?
9.
9. Do we have any questions? Shall we ask them to quickly type a question in if they have one?
Just it.
We'll wait a few seconds and see if anything comes up.
Just while we're waiting, just for information purposes, the Irving is supposed to be closing tomorrow for 6 weeks.
Yes,
What?
Now,
Here?
they're putting new tanks in
they
the.
put new tanks and everything, in, so they have it closed for 6 weeks.
Oh, no.
Yeah, we were officially notified a couple days ago and we kind of just said like, well, you really want to make sure you let people know, but we didn't really feel it was our place to let people know.
And we,
I mean, no harm in doing it here, but
they still haven't confirmed if the, like the grocery, the little store and everything, the
They
state
don't, yeah, they didn't know that last time also.
just the selling of
it
gas.
sounded like the Tim's drive-through was also definitely.
Well, that will be gone
because
because-
tanks in there, but the Tim's might be open for walk-in. That's why, I guess that's why I didn't want.
It's their chance to redo the Tim drive-through.
Exactly,
Yeah,
Mm.
but also during Scarecrow, we usually hold our barbecue there, now doing it in the lanery next to Eli's.
Didn't take a lot of adjustment not having.
did she?
Yeah.
Good.
So that's,
Questions? None. Okay. With that, we will say goodnight to the folks from home and thank them for joining us. I hope they found some of our discussions interesting and on point. And if they do have any questions in the coming days, I would encourage them to contact myself or a member of staff or a member of council and pursue the questions they'd like to have answered.
Before we close up, we should have that motion to go in camera. On the
Oh, yes,
recording.
yes, okay. All right, entertain a motion to go in camera. Councillor Carver, seconded by Councillor Now.
Motion to go on camera to discuss MGA 22.2A, 22.2C, and 22.2E.
Okay, our agenda being concluded. The open portion of the meeting is concluded.
Let you know when we're done.
We don't